Hello again. I'm Steve McAllister, and this is the Gaming News Canada show presented by Bede Gaming. Well, folks, we turn the page on July, and geez, we're almost midway through August. As we've reported every week on the podcast and in the newsletter, the summer of 2026 has been a bit of a runaway train for the Canadian gaming industry. And smack dab in the middle of all the goings-on has been Paul Burns, the Canadian Gaming Association's president and CEO. With apologies to Willie Nelson, Paul's on the road again as we catch up with him in Calgary. So, Paul, some 3 weeks after the launch of Alberta's regulated sports betting and online gaming market, did you miss the place?
I did. And it's Alberta's been great. I've spent a lot of time here in the last year or so, and especially in the last month. And didn't expect to be back, but actually the opportunity that was created is that Gibraltar's Minister for Justice, Trade and Industry and responsible for financial services and gaming is here in Calgary this week on a bit of a trade mission. And so meeting with officials from the government of Alberta, and later today we'll be meeting with industry. So Minister Feedham is here with his staff and talking about really some of the things they've done there around the regulation of prediction markets, the introduction of digital cryptocurrency usage in their business. And so there is and a chance to connect with AGLC and the government officials here in Alberta. So the industry is going to sit down with him and Alberta officials for a bit of a roundtable today.
For our listeners and watchers and the subscribers to the newsletter who see a lot of references often to the Isle of Man, Gibraltar, Malta, I wonder why that's the case. Can you give us a bit of a history lesson just on those countries and their connections to regulated gambling?
Well, they were some of the first jurisdictions to create regulated markets. In some cases, close to 2 decades ago. And so I think there's already an overlap of, I think there's 7 licensees that hold licenses in Alberta and both in Gibraltar right now. I think that's the number I heard as of now. That will obviously grow. So it's Gibraltar was one of those first jurisdictions that set up very robust regulatory and AML structures. And a lot of the jurisdictions, it's a chance where provincial regulators here in Canada may have MOUs to where they share information and learnings with each other. And I think that's something that may come out of this visit from between Gibraltar and the AGLC. And so it's given their long history around this and relationship with the industry. It was a place where, Ontario, when they did, AGCO did a couple of years of study before the government of Ontario took on their own study, is to learn where the best practices and what regulatory practices were being taken. And I think this is the case of the visit by the minister this week is, again, they've worked in looking at dealing with a model for regulating predictions contracts and also on the use of crypto. And I think that's obviously things that, regulators needing to keep pace with technology and keep pace with customer preferences and all of those things can be challenging. And that's why these conversations are good, because you can learn from each other. And so they have a long history in Gibraltar with the industry, and gaming is a big part of their regulatory scheme and tax revenue and other things for the country. So it's been it was great that this occurred. The timing was, I think, convenient for being post-market open, and so it's we'll see what discussions it sparks, but these are always good to have.
When this podcast comes out, the Alberta market will be almost a month old to the day. We're recording this interview with Paul on Thursday, August 6th. We did get the news this week that Bally's has now joined the Alberta market. I think there are now 26 gaming sites, according to the Alberta Gaming Corporation. And you and I did get a chance to spend some time in Edmonton back on July 13th on the opening day of the Alberta market. Just just some broad strokes, Paul, on what you've seen so far, and it does feel like there is, I guess this is as close a honeymoon period as I would think you could get with any regulated market opening.
It has been quite positive. I mean, I think from the opening, and even from you go back 2 years when the minister Nally made his announcement about why they were going to do this. The government of Alberta has been consistent in talking about player protection, and creating a strong regulated base for consumers to take their activity into a regulated market. Um, and they have followed through, and if even to the opening, and you were there and heard the minister's comments, the foundation built on this is around building a strong regulatory regime, good consumer protection measures, and supports for the people that need it. And that's why they had a self-exclusion system ready to go day one. Enhanced treatment is available right now, and will only work to improve. And other responsible gaming measures. AIGC has had a public information campaign going in this province since May, and that will probably continue through the balance of the year, on promoting the market, promoting player tools and consumer protection measures, and where people can get help. And so to the credit of, and I will say this, to the AGLC and AIGC, as the two agencies, have done a tremendous amount of work in a short period of time to make this happen. And the fact that I can honestly say that there's not been any issues of any significance from the operator community about everything is working the way it's supposed to. And so it's just a matter of getting companies into market as they get through the process, and that will continue. And I've heard more people getting their licenses this week, even, that will come in the coming weeks. So it's to credit to all of them and the work they're doing, and still working to have conversations on things like this with the prediction markets and crypto, with which are probably well down the road. But the point is that the agencies here have done an incredible amount of work and continue to be very responsive to industry, and that's been, I think, part of the success in getting everybody into market. And when you see, obviously, the presence is being felt. It was, and here's Ring Stampede, the companies had, boots on the ground, and they've continued to present themselves to the people of Alberta, and that's whether it's through commitments and partnerships with charities and community organizations. People have dug in to try and make themselves, present in the community, and not just with an ad, but with actual, um, donations to communities, lending volunteer time. All of that thing has been real, and it's been great to see. And so, I think I'm hearing very positive things from the operator community about what their experience has been in terms of signups and customer experience. So it's off to a great start.
I mean, it feels like a bit of shift in strategy when you talk about the charitable donations. I asked Paul Lieberman from DraftKings about that on the opening day, and again, I said, in fairness to, in terms of that question, April 2022 in Ontario was much different. We were still, if not in the middle, we were still dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. First Canadian market open. But do you think there's been a deliberate shift in strategy, Paul, or is it just we're in a different time and place in terms of the market launching? Again, you go back to 2022, it really felt like a bombardment, and you and I have talked ad nauseum about this, of advertising and sponsorship deals, and so I do wonder if maybe there have been some shifting sands.
Well, I mean, listen, what we know is that and people can have their own opinions, but the advertising market, especially with television, is a national one. And so they're already there. They have been there. And so it's about introducing themselves to Albertans. And so in doing that is by being here. And that's what the companies have chosen to do. And I think that's reflection of how they make themselves, their presence felt in this market, and awareness within this market. Because I think that's deliberate on their part. Yes, I think we benefit that from what happened in 22 and the learnings that came through those first few months. of understanding, the languages that are permitted and not permitted in advertising, and a lot of things. The learnings, like everybody's learned, everybody's applied, so you start from a different place. Um, and I think that's where we've come, and the companies have matured, but also I think they've learned a bit more about Canada, in many of them that didn't know a lot at the time. Um, and I think seeing that, how it is competitive, and how to stand out and differentiate yourself has become, more. Um, it's a needed activity for operators to make themselves present, and introduce themselves to market, and so there's still lots more companies still to come in this Alberta market, and so yeah, there's lots of out of home ads and billboards and other things and sponsorship deals and all those things being done. Um, and that's how the brands will present themselves. And yes, and it's um, I think the industry is cognizant of a volume of ad and presence, but at the same time, it is a competitive industry they've introduced to the province. And one of the privileges you do get with being licensed and regulated is you do get to advertise.
The CGA introduced, I think, at the beginning of the year, it's advertising code, and I just wonder, from your standpoint, Paul, what is it that you and the association will be watching for as this market launches? And again, already, I think on the first day of the launch, I'm sitting in my hotel room in Edmonton on the Monday morning, and you're seeing 2 or 3 stories on TV and on websites already about the anticipated onslaught of advertising. But what's top of mind for the association in terms of your new advertising code and what you'll be watching for?
Well, what we're watching and wanting operators to understand is the advertising code is a guide for everybody. It's about building awareness, understanding the code of advertising, okay, through ad standards. Main code applies to everybody anyway. In particular, I want to highlight the fact they have a code around influencer marketing, and that we've tagged into the gaming advertising code. And in particular, understanding, and what we've tried to stress and will continue to, and we'll be doing more this fall, is that you need your creatives and any of the influencers and any people you use to make sure that they understand the rules. Because not knowing, or I didn't know, is not a good excuse. And people need to do better and understand. And I like to say that the regulatory standards are the floor, not the ceiling. And the point is, you need to be cognizant and be aware and be mindful and take the extra time to understand where you're putting and where these are going. And I understand there's all programmatic advertising and all kinds of things, but be cognizant of and take the extra time to make the details to make sure you get it right. Because that's where, I know that the regulators here are watching and seeing things. I know that they're, and it's, and that's what we're trying to impress upon the operators, is that you take the time, you do it right, you understand the code, and you follow the rules, and make sure you stay in the lane, and finding ways to be better and do better. Because that's, again, the privilege of becoming and being part of this regulated market, is that right to advertise. We want to protect it, but we also need to understand we have a responsibility. And that's the biggest part, which we are trying to encourage and want to. The work of the CGA's Responsible Gaming Working Group is continuing and to do more, and trying to build upon that. Can we give operators tools? Can we provide other ways of guidance, but also doing other things in the space? So there's lots happening, but with the code in particular, we're trying to remind people it's there. There's broader advertising codes and rules, and you need to make sure in all facets of your marketing that you're making sure that you're respecting those, because that's key. Because if we start to see the erosion, then we start to lose public trust, and frankly, then the regulators are probably well within their right to start clamping down and changing rules, and
Hey,
that's what
Paul,
we don't want. And there's no need for that, because everybody should know and be responsible enough.
just one last question on Alberta. The fact, I think we must be close to 20 operators now doing business in Alberta, and as you mentioned earlier, with more to come in the near future. Like, what's that tell you about the process and about the opportunities in Alberta?
Well, we always have known this is a really robust gaming market. I mean, when you've looked at annual per capita spends, in many cases they were double those of Ontario and other provinces in the east. usually only outranked by Saskatchewan. um, and uh, and so yeah, everybody's understanding Alberta is still a growing province. It's a young province, a very strong entrepreneurial spirit. It's low tax rates, so there is more disposable income here. And so there's lots of strong attributes to it, and I think um, that's people are recognizing that and seeing that it is a place to be. And you know, I would have not thought that 4 years in you're still seeing new market entries in Ontario at this pace we are seeing them. But we are, and why? Because it's a regulatory regime that's built around creating a fair competitive marketplace. Um, I point to things like no mass market of bonusing and incentives was a way that the biggest companies who can give away the most money tend to dominate the market. No, there's still bonusing and incentive, but the point is, it's brand, product, service um, are having to be present, and so I think that's and a lot of companies are saying, yeah, I can compete on that. Happy to do it, and let's join the party and get in and see what we can do. And I think that's a testament to the models that have been created, which have a high level of consumer protection built into them and strong oversight. And so it's the right balance, I guess, has been found. And Alberta, in many ways, emulating what Ontario had built upon, and with their own tweaks and improvements, has been great. And so the early days are positive.
Is your iGaming platform truly driving your digital growth? Bede Gaming isn't just a software supplier, they're your partner for success. Achieve your unique ambitions with Bede's SOC 2 compliant platform, scalable multi-tenant infrastructure, and robust integration catalog. Find out more about Bede's unparalleled partnership model, including what their current customers have to say at bedegaming.com. I want to get into prediction markets in a second, but before I do, we covered in the newsletter this week, and with Greg Moore, the chair of the British Columbia Lottery Corporation, has had a few posts on LinkedIn lately. We've covered those in the newsletters. The most recent post, I guess, basically suggested that there should be questions asked of around regulated gaming and whether or not that was opening the door for global companies to take money out of Canada, and I guess this was in some respects reference to the ongoing trade war right now between the U.S. and Canada. We covered in the newsletter. Helene Fortin, the former chair of Lotto Quebec, had a couple of posts in response to Moore's comments this week. I just wonder, what you wearing your CGA hat, do you have any thoughts on that back and forth?
I think we have to understand. I mean, everybody's entitled to their opinions and view. I hadn't read it, a lot of it in particular, but I did hear about it. But I would say that understanding the gaming industry is global, and the fact that in spite of our differences with the United States over trade and other things, that we're still very much intertwined economy and have been for decades. And in our industry, we see we have suppliers that are U.S. based, have been providing. I go to IGT, has a huge footprint here in Canada. Yeah, they're a U.S. owned company, but they have a lot of people here that do a lot of work. They've been selling slot machines here for decades, and we have Canadian companies that sell abroad. But everybody, what they look for is product. And so, yeah, are people going to do business with others outside the country? Yes. Are operators coming to market because it's a global market? Yes. It's the nature of today's economy, and there's ways we can promote our own, in Canadian businesses, and we love to do that, especially the innovators and entrepreneurs who are trying to build businesses in this space. And that I think people should, there's lots of great Canadian products, and I know them. You've talked to many of them on this program. And how do we help them grow their businesses? So I just think it's a bit of mixing some politics and others and emotion, and it's like fine. But I understand that it's the nature of what our business is, and everybody's been doing business with the best companies that provide the best products to deliver the best service to their customers. And that sometimes, yeah, they're Canadian, sometimes they're not. And a lot of them are, whether they're European or wherever they come from. The fact is that, in the gaming business, I think we pride ourselves in the fact that we're a global industry and continue to grow now. And we need, we got to do business with others. It's important. And so I'll leave it at that and say that, I think that there's the nature of what we need to see done is about protecting consumers and understanding where the customer is today and what they want. And governments can construct a lot of models, but if the consumer is not there, if the consumer is deciding that they want to do it and they're doing that, then you kind of have to go where they are and you have to understand and do the tools. And that's what Alberta and Ontario have done.
Yeah, and I think we've seen a lot of money go back and forth. I mean, I think of in terms of BCLC, the GameSense product and the partnership and relationship they have with MGM Resorts and Bede MGM, and I think of GeoComply, which has its roots in Vancouver, but obviously has offices in the U.S. and I believe other parts of the world. And the sponsors of Gaming News Canada, Bede Gaming. I mean, we spent a day talking to OLG and other people for some video work that Parlay did on behalf of Bede Gaming during the SBC Summit Canada back in May, and OLG couldn't say enough. I mean, they were gushing about the relationship with Bede Gaming. So this is a global industry. I think we still, despite what's happened in the U.S., I think international trade and international economic partnerships are still really, really important. And as you put it so well, that also applies to the gambling industry.
Yeah, it does. And and that's why I just I look at it and say, yeah, we've you can. Everybody's entitled to their opinions and stuff, but we understand the reality of the world we live in and what we need to do, and that's important. And because a lot of companies who do business here have invested a lot, and I love doing business. Canada has been a great gaming market for a lot of companies, and as I said, I mentioned IGT is one who's invested a lot of money and time and resources in this country, and it's well appreciated. And so you look at the example, and that's why it's like I think that there's a time and place for some of these discussions, but the reality is that creating markets abroad for Canadian companies is really important. It's something that we like to promote those companies when we talk to other markets and trying to introduce them to companies. And there's lots of great examples. I mean, Pollard is in their part, their acquisition of Amcodo, and part of the Pollard family has been great. And the Pollard family is sells their products all over the world, and are a great Canadian success story.
I want to start the prediction markets conversation with really just a really simple question. Like, has the Canadian Gaming Association taken a position on prediction markets?
We have. I mean, ultimately, this is a product that, unfortunately, a lot of our conversation, it needs to be a regulated product. Let's be clear about that. And there's some questions in here, but when you look at, some people are debating, well, should it be the securities regulators? Should it be the gaming regulators? I don't the definitive answer right now. I would say there's definitely room for both, and whether both want to be there. I don't think the gaming industry is going anywhere, but in terms of wanting to regulate product, what I actually have to back up is, let's not use the United States as an example. So we have some things here where there's benefit. One, the provinces do have control. They have securities regulators. We don't have a national body that's overseeing this and creating another tier of regulation or anything. The provinces have control because they control their securities regulators. That's good. So the national policy arms, CSA, CIRA, who have said, yes, you can do this within this box. We're going to say, great, they've set policy. Securities commissions now are going to decide how that gets operationalized. Second thing is as you know, Steve, the gaming industry has always said this is entertainment. This is not a way to earn money to pay the rent. This is not a way to build a lifestyle. This is not a way to invest your money. And then you've got a group that comes here and says, well, we're an investment product. And I'm like, okay, so I don't necessarily see it as an investment product all the time, with some of the markets that have been created in the prediction space. And so you've got organizations say, yeah, we help build people's wealth and look at their long-term investment for their financial future and all of these things. And we have this product. And that's where I think some people look at this and you may want to scratch your head or go, what are you now? And because we're not selling mutual funds on the side of a sports betting platform.
Right.
So understand that, and that we and appreciate that's where I think there needs to be a very robust conversation, because we've always been adamant that there's not two ways that we should be regulating sports wagering. Period. It is the purview of the provincial gaming regulators and should stay that way. In particular, but is there room? Because when you look in the Ontario and Alberta now regulatory regimes, there's room for betting exchanges. There is room for event wagering. Do we need to look at those regulatory standards and that regime and see, is there a way to better accommodate emerging new products? Because I can tell you, this is our conversation today. I don't know what the next product will be in 3 years from now and what the regulatory regime may need to look like. But that's the challenge regulators are going to have in today's age, is that it's innovation. Your regulatory standards are going to continue to evolve, and the conversations can never stop. Because you can also say, okay, well, Canada and the government's moving towards stablecoin in Canada, and maybe in a couple of years we'll have that. So what is going to be the policies around the use of crypto and everything?
Right.
And in the country. So we all have to, these conversations are going to come, but this one's in front of us right now. And so when I look at that and say that, I think there's been a lot of conversations between securities regulators and gaming regulators in a lot of provinces, which is great. And within that, the provinces will likely decide, and if we can see, to work towards some kind of level of harmonization about who does what in this space. And I think that that's something that everybody has been working towards. I think some would say on the prediction side that they're frustrated because they haven't gotten them, no one's moving quick enough. I'm like, well, that's regulators. Sometimes that they move at the pace of industry they want to. But that's where we need to have this conversation about what, in terms of, there are companies who are in gaming companies who are in and looking at prediction markets and offers products. I get it. And they want to potentially offer it here in Canada. Great. But is it a case of who's needs to get a lading license, or who needs to get a securities license? And I think that's some of the stuff that I don't think there's. And so we're trying to talk to the companies and want to, engage with companies like Wealthsimple and say, let's have this conversation as what it does and the best way to do this. Because, I will openly say that securities regulators do some things quite well, but gaming regulators also do some things exceptionally well. And so Wealthsimple did issue a white paper this week and had some very good comments in it. And obviously their commitment and understanding, I think they've learned a lot from the gaming industry about how they can deal with player protection. That's great. But I also understand that you can't just say, well, we think we should be able to offer this product this way because this will. I don't know if securities regulators in every jurisdiction are quite prepared to take this on. And there hasn't been a definitive, of what other than the small box in which they've been given the policy room for. But we know that won't stop there. We know that there's a lot of conversation around Wealthsimple because of their predict app that they've launched and other things that they've put out there. But there is other providers that have been in the space offering these contracts to Canadians outside of the securities regulators haven't clamped down on them for months. Sound familiar? When we talk about, unlicensed operators accessing Ontario and Alberta markets still. So we have a lot of similarities in our conversation, but we also need a conversation understanding where we are, because under that we honestly, a lot of people look at this and would say it's gambling, and it's not an investment product. And we can debate whether there's inherent value in a derivatives contract on certain things. Yeah, there probably is, but is there on a sports bet or on a election piece? And Alberta's been clear, no election event wagering in this province. And and one of the things in the white paper that Wealthsimple issued, they talked about settlements of contracts and what's the determinant. Well, and one thing that they didn't put in is how they can propose to settle sports. Well, the gaming industry has a mechanism on settling sports. It's called official league data, and a very robust set of standards to determine what sports can be wagered on based on the rules and structure within those organizations as leagues on insider policy and integrity and data feeds and all of those kinds of things. So there is some rules. And I don't think there should be two ways to have a regulated product like sports. And that's in particular where I see this debate starting. And we've always, as from that focus, is that sports should remain part of the gaming regulatory regime. And because that's where it's dealt with best. And there shouldn't be two ways to regulate the product and different regimes. If companies want to come and get gaming licenses, and if that means gaming regulators have to, do some modernization of their own regulatory standards, then let's have that conversation too.
Right, and not just sports, Paul, but again, it just feels like right now, like if you looked up Wild West in the dictionary, you'd see a picture of what's going on with prediction markets in the U.S. and the lawsuits and I think sports leagues were quick to take the money from Kalshi and Polymarket. Polymarket this week, as we record this interview, and they just announced deals with the ATP Tennis Tour and the New York Mets. And we've had insider trading cases involving prediction markets. And I think the Guardian this week had a story on a prediction market contract or whatever you want to call it around a child with a cancer diagnosis, and we've got trading on the wildfires in California. I mean, it just that doesn't seem a way you want to introduce something to Canadians where it's willy-nilly, no guardrails. And I was able to get my hands on a copy of the Wealthsimple white paper, and that makes it pretty clear that they don't believe there's a need for a gaming regulator. But I find it hard to believe that a provincial securities commission would have the kind of knowledge, at least at this time, to deal with questions and concerns around what as far as I'm concerned are bets, right? Whether it's a sporting match or an election or who's going to win the Academy Award for Best Male Actor.
Yeah, and I think that's where I think that we know that to the credit, the securities regulators and gaming regulators in the country are generally speaking to each other, which is important, and determining between them how they want to do this. And I think that's going to be incredibly important to understand there's clarity and rules. And the sooner the better. But yeah, I encourage everybody. It's like, fortunately, we're not in the same position as the United States, and it will not evolve the same way. Now, I would, I think that Wealthsimple's using the Kalshi engine at the back end. Great. Is Kalshi going to stop offering VPNs in this country because of that? Because there's things like that are going on, and I think that, and so we want to see clarity sooner. We keep hearing there's going to be more from the organizations, and I've had, I was here in the Alberta Securities Commission in July. I had a conversation around their investigating. They've been talking actively to AGLC and the IGC about this. But there's also there's consumer demand. These products are going to be there. So you need to answer with a regulatory regime and create clear rules with player protection, same things apply. And it's a new and different product because there will be others, and that's just the nature of innovation and technology and the way things are rolling. That these will be, today it's prediction markets, tomorrow will be something else. And so, in having a clear understanding of what this is, but I don't, what has gone on in the U.S. in particular is they seem to be, the prediction market players have started. They're building their compliance and regulatory um, models as they're going down the road. It's like building the car on the freeway. It's nice when we're going to do this. Well, it's like, it just seems like there's the talk about it's about how much money can we make, how fast can we make it, versus understanding the longevity and long term of this product. And it's they're not looking at it from that perspective. And I think we are starting to do that here in Canada, and I think that's where it'll be different. Because listen, I understand people may want to offer this product, but I think we need to understand the statement of law, what it is, and if it's gambling product, then it's in the gambling space.
Yeah, and not coincidentally, I mean the current administration, the White House in the U.S. just puts more gas in the fire. You've got the two sons of the president sitting on boards of, I think, both Kelshi and Paula Market. The CFTC, the new chair of the CFTC is a Trump appointee, and I mean that just adds to the mess.
And that's not going to end, right? There's some 30-some odd lawsuits flying around right now, and it will end either through the courts or some other way. But and that's where I think I've seen some positive signs from Wealthsimple in terms of how they're presenting their app and how they're doing this, and some of the other things they're going to be putting in is great. I think they're coming at it from a better place than some of the other players in the market, but they're one, and there will be many, many more. And so the idea is that we all need to understand. That's why standards are important.
Hey, before we let you go, on the week we record this interview, Better Collective and Catena Media have announced some layoffs. It's been a tough year for the industry in some regards in terms of job cuts. I mean, you mentioned IGT earlier. They laid off 700 employees back in March. DraftKings, The Score, and FanDuel, that there've been job cuts for those companies this year. And we got the news this week that Peter Jackson is out as CEO of Flutter Entertainment about, I think, 3 months after Amy Howe was let go as president of FanDuel, and he's being replaced by Dan Taylor. You've been around the industry an awful lot longer than I have. Is this what do you make of this? It's just the way things happen. Is this are we seeing the impacts of AI, et cetera, et cetera?
I think there's a few things to put to this. One, obviously M&A activity always brings, unfortunately, it's the efficiencies is
right.
the code word for cutting costs. And that always comes, and we've seen it, from, particularly we saw from the slot business in North America. There was, I think 7 companies became 5, and now we're seeing fewer again. But there's still room, and there's always, the people launching new products too. And so that's inevitability of what happens in an M&A series. The other side in the online space, I think you have to go back and look at how, particularly in the United States, how markets evolved, and that you added markets one by one by one. In many cases, these organizations sort of, okay, we had that team and we replicated again, and we replicated again and replicate again. When you get to a certain size, you can find efficiencies, and that your compliance department can deal with 30 states and 30 jurisdictions as equal as they could have dealt with 5. And so you don't need all that volume behind it. And that's where we've seen some of that stuff, is understanding now as growth has cooled and the fact about new markets, inevitably it turns to looking at how do we do things better and more efficiently. And I think that's also just a nature of business and what you have to do. And so I think that's what we've seen a lot of that. And the interesting part, though, is as I look at, when it comes to Alberta and others, there's been investment in the human capital side in this country, where there are more people being hired in some of the Canadian operators or foreign companies that are doing business here and hiring people here and setting up shop. and that's the other side. Like, and some of the positive is the fact that what we're seeing here is the fact that people understand we need to invest in markets. And so I think it's about, corporate priorities and putting it where the effort is. And that's why I think we've seen footprints grow in Canada in some of these places, which is an encouraging sign. We always, because there was rounds of layoffs after, as we came out of COVID in the early days, after about year one, 18 months of Ontario market opening, we saw layoffs in certain companies, from the Score to Poker Stars and the Flutter team here in Canada and others. But then, others have hired and grown. And so it is, it's the nature of operation, but the fact that there's still, from a Canadian perspective, that there's still companies interested in joining these markets and investing in these markets is good for us in this country. And we want to make sure that there's still a healthy climate to do that. And that's important. And so, on a global scale, I understand what companies need to do, but we're also understanding, looking here in Canada, that there's some pretty positive outlooks.
Last question there. I referenced the runaway train in the introduction, Paul, and I just wonder, I assume that's once we get north of Labor Day, it's going to be the same. We're going to be in the same boat. I just wondering what's kind of top of mind for you and Amanda Brewer and Brandon Alpatuff at the Canadian Gaming Association entering the fall.
Well, there's a busy agenda. Obviously, we know Bill S-211 is going to be dealt with in the House of Commons. S-241 will be in front of the Senate Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee at some point this fall. But also there's other things that we're working through. We've been very active discussions with the government around the need for modernizing our AML laws in this country. We hope there will be an FATF report on the review they did of Canada last fall that we released sometime in the coming weeks. We hope that there will be a look at modernizing the AML regime in this country out of that. We're been active in discussion. We voiced our support for Bill C-34 and the Digital Safety Act, and the need that social media platforms use age gating. Industry does it every day. It's not hard to do. Happy to teach the folks at Meta what that means if they need it. And so that's what we think that there's a fair bit on the federal agenda as well, as let alone, we're looking to have discussions around the gaming review that occurred in Ontario, and having discussions with governments particularly around the need for modernization around some of the land-based gaming models in this country. And so there's lots to talk about and lots to do. We have a white paper series coming this fall, and so we'll have a series of 4 papers. And really, it's about prompting a discussion about the future of Canada's gaming industry. And that will lead to a conference in Toronto on November 16, 17, where we'll discuss the papers. And really, it's about a conversation, and the coming out of this is understanding where we think we need to have, where the discussion should focus about what kind of gaming industry we want in this country on a go-forward basis. And I think that's an important discussion to start. That will help guide some of our work into 27 and beyond. But we think it's an important conversation to start and bring everybody together to have the conversation. There's lots of opinions and lots of thoughts, but there's also, the industry is evolving at quite a pace, and there's challenges for regulators, there's challenges for governments. And we're cognizant that things like the cost of compliance on companies is something to be very mindful of, especially in the land-based markets that are maturing, and the growth is a little harder to come by sometimes. If rising compliance costs and overhead costs from reporting to government start to eat into your business too much, it gets a problem. And so these are conversations we want to have, because we all think that there's a way everybody can achieve their goals, but we need to do it better and more efficiently. And so that's some of the stuff so as you can tell, it's a long list, lots to do. But we're excited about the conversations. I'm going to start with the white papers on responsible gaming, talking about regulatory harmonization, but also about the future of our industry in terms of what it looks like, also from a consumer point of view and what they see, because this is all about the customer, right? And that's understanding is where are they and what do they see, and with that, then how can the industry then respond and deliver a great entertainment product in a safe, responsible manner? Because we all want the same thing.
Yeah, and I have to believe too that once, especially once we see the first report from AIGC, whenever that comes out, I expect we'll see conversations happening in other provinces who are no doubt going to have to take a look at whether or not they join Ontario and Alberta with regulated markets.
Exactly, and I think that's and that's when we encourage the provinces to go through a process. Right, everybody, it's like your gaming industry within your jurisdiction, you have the rights to do what you need to do, what's in the best interest of the consumers in your jurisdiction, as well as understanding how the gaming industry can adapt and grow from that. And that's what we encourage those conversations, because it's through that you end up coming out with good policy, and that's how we found in Ontario and Alberta both did that. And I think that's where we see and both aren't standing still either. That's the other side, is that they've done this and then they're continuing to start to look at how they deliver their gaming models. And that's important, because it's the conversation shouldn't end.
That is Paul Burns, the full-time president and CEO of the Canadian Gaming Association and part-time resident of the province of Alberta. Paul, really grateful for you as always to take the time to talk to us, and enjoy your time in Calgary, and we'll look forward to speaking again soon.
Thanks, Steve. Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That's it for this episode of the Gaming News Canada Show, presented by Bede Gaming. You can listen to this show on the various podcast apps. You can also watch my conversation with Paul on the GNC YouTube channel. Thank you for listening to and watching this program. Bye for now.